Denver is currently facing an unprecedented migrant crisis, nearly 36,000 arrivals. Not one word of it in your State of the State. Why?
Well, first of all, I focus on the vision for our state. There's pieces we talked about that pertain to that, the biggest one being housing. There's many dimensions to housing, whether it's homelessness, whether it's migrants, whether it's people that have lived here for generations. We need more housing that people can afford in the state of Colorado. But the state has partnered to help Denver, just as we would any city, on issues like homelessness, on issues with addressing with the migrant situation. We worked with the Joint Budget Committee just a couple weeks ago to get approval for about $5 million. And the state is helping with legal clinics, with transportation and logistical costs, and with processing to help the city of Denver where they need it. And we're in constant touch with them about what else we can do to support any of our cities, frankly, in our state and in the areas that they face their challenges.
The fact that this is such a massive problem for Denver, and it didn't so much as get a mention in your speech, is that an indication that this is Denver's problem, not your problem?
Well, I think first of all, what I tried to do in my speech, and we did, is we framed the items that are of statewide concern, right? I'm not the mayor of Denver. We work with the mayor of Denver. We support the mayor of Denver. The mayor of Denver is there, mayor of Colorado Springs, mayor of Aurora, mayor of Fort Collins. And of course, the state wants to help all of our mayors achieve what they need. But the statewide issue we talked about is housing, and that's a dimension to homelessness and to migrants. It's also a dimension for every Coloradan, which is why we talked about it. We talked about public safety. That's important for every Coloradan. So I didn't give a speech that was Denver themed or Boulders themed or Grand Junction themed. We tried to focus on the issues that legislators who represent every area of our state, the vast majority of it don't have any migrants in their House district. If you represent, Southeast Colorado or Pueblo, we wanted to really bring them together around the issues that we expect the whole body should prioritize. Housing affordability and public safety being the top two that we hope to work with them on.
One last question on this, and I want to talk about some other things in the speech, to kind of compare Colorado's involvement with the migrant crisis versus what other states are doing. So in the state of Illinois, Governor Pritzker's put like $300 million into the migrant crisis. The state is staffing shelters in Chicago. In New York State, $1.8 billion from the state. The National Guard is working shelters there. My understanding is that Colorado has given Denver less than $10 million to address Denver's crisis.
Well, first of all, in absolute numbers, to be clear, we have far less people, and per capita, I know it's challenging for us, but we have far less numbers than Chicago or New York, so I want to make that clear. If you look at the amount their cities have spent, it's exponentially more than what Denver has spent as well. We have worked with Denver to try to help them meet their needs. The areas that they've identified are contracting with non-governmental organizations for legal clinics to help process asylum claims. We're taking that on with our resources. Transportation and logistics. There was a time, and I think it was not this Christmas, but it was the prior Christmas when we had a lot of migrants where we helped with staffing because Denver requested that. There was also a time more recently where we took volunteers from the state workforce, meaning we have 32,000 people we employ. We said, if you would like to basically get comp time to go help Denver, we had several dozen people that did that. And so, again, we're happy to hear what Denver's needs are. We're in very close conversation with them. I don't think there's any daylight between us. And we really want to keep the focus on the federal government where it belongs, the only entity that can remedy this, the only entity that secure our borders, the only entity that can give work permits, the only entity that can and should pay for areas where they failed to act. And that's really what Mayor Johnston and mayors across the country, as well as governors across the country, have brought the focus on. And that, of course, doesn't mean just the president. In fact, by and large, it means Congress more than the president, because the president can only do so much. Much of this requires changes in law and resources that can only come from the United States Congress.
Let's talk about housing affordability. So you tried to push through a land use reform package last year, didn't have the Democratic votes to do it. What makes you think that localities in Colorado are any more interested in what the state has to say about how they use their land this year than last year? Because they weren't having it last year.
Yeah, well, again, what we're focused on is the individual level, property rights. What does your property right mean? If you have a house, if you have an apartment, what can you do and what can't you do? Very reasonably, local governments say you can't build a 30-story skyscraper in a residential neighborhood, right? When we look at things like accessory dwelling units, if you want to add a bedroom to your home, these are things that Coloradans, no matter where they live, ought to be able to do. In fact, one of the reasons we have a housing crisis with outrageously high housing costs is we've prevented people from adding additional housing inventory, the hardest kind of homes to build have been the most affordable kinds, like accessory dwelling units and triplexes and apartments. Those are harder to be able to build in areas of our state that are near job centers. We want to make it easier. We had Yusuf today with us, a homeowner in Denver who was able to build an accessory dwelling unit. But if you want to build an accessory dwelling unit, rather than it taking a year and a half of fighting City Hall and $15,000 in legal fees, let's make it quick, easy, and lower cost so you can be part of the solution to the housing crisis, and the homeowner can also gain an additional revenue stream from renting out any additional bedrooms in their unit.
Briefly, what did you learn from last year's failure that informs your efforts this year to get it across the finish line?
Well, the housing crisis has only gotten worse, and mostly that's a function of interest rates going up, but housing is less affordable than it was a year ago. So I think this is even more top of mind for Coloradans than it was then. Legislatively, what I think you're going to see, Kyle, is this concept that there's no silver bullet. We're going to have, and there already are, 6, 7, 10 different ideas in this area, ending occupancy limits, not requiring parking restrictions, parking spots above and beyond what the person actually wants. All of these kinds of things that add cost will have different bills, and I'm confident that most of them will make it through. I hope all of them make it through, but we're going to make some progress on this issue because the people of Colorado demand it. We can't continue on the current path where housing will be as unattainable here as it is in many cities in California with average home prices above $1 million. We do not want that for Colorado.
Civility is a big focus of yours, and you brought it up in the speech today, and it's been a real challenge in this building, in the state capitol. Had a number of state legislators from within your party resign, citing the vitriol here. How do you assess the efforts of leaders within your own party to deal with the tension within this building? Are they handling it appropriately? And how do you strike a balance between free speech and decorum?
So, and I talked about this today. I talked about Disagree Better, an initiative I'm pursuing with Republican Governor Spencer Cox of Utah. But it's also about how we disagree. And it doesn't mean that everybody's supposed to agree. In fact, I specifically called out we have these problems both within parties and between parties, which we do. Members of the legislature have rules to follow. They can give speeches on topics that they want. And then, of course, as we also talked about, there's a destructive form of speech, which means cutting people off, interrupting people, of course, any physical attack on another member of the legislature or making them feel threatened. And I hope that what our leaders, our Speaker McCluskey, President Fenberg, I hope what they're doing, and they focus on this in their beginning speeches yesterday, is set that tone of civility. And hopefully that'll inspire members of the legislature to really achieve this promise of how to disagree better.
One last question for you. I want to compare and contrast the responses from folks within your administration to how the wolf reintroduction was handled, the actual release of the wolves. You've been joking around about it on social media. Colorado now with wolves.
That's what I do, not unique to wolves.
I understand. Yeah, I mean, you joke around about a lot of stuff, but including wolves. Meanwhile, your Parks and Wildlife Director is out there apologizing to CPW commissioners, apologizing to the legislature for a lack of transparency and communication about how this was handled. So here's my question for you. Are you sorry about how it went?
No, look, I think it was very hard. The task the voters gave to Colorado Parks and Wildlife, the voters said, introduce wolves by December 31st of last year, which effectively left about a 3-week window to actually introduce wolves, legal actions, 10J, lots of paperwork around wolves. So at the end of the day, CPW had 3 weeks to comply with the law. I don't think it would have been feasible for them to give a specific heads up where and when to dozens of people. The word would have, it shouldn't have become a circus, right? This needed to be a wildlife specialist-led effort, which it was. They didn't tell me until the morning of where we were going, right? Nor should they have. I mean, the governor doesn't need to know, but the morning of, that's when I found out. So I think what we need to do a better job on is managing the very real conflicts that wolf presents, particularly around ranchers and our ranching communities. And we're, as an administration, deeply dedicated to doing that. We now have an MOU between our Department of Agriculture and Colorado Parks and Wildlife, and we're seeking more resources from the legislature to be able to help provide more support for our ranchers in Colorado for non-lethal wolf management to prevent and reduce predation and loss.
Given that it's something that Coloradans think could impact their livelihoods, is it something you're going to keep joking around about?
Well, I have I hope you think, a good sense of humor. I like to have a lively social media feed, both on my personal as well as my a professional governor of Colorado account. And I think what you see generally through what we do is we try to uplift and find joy and humor. And unlike certain other national leaders, and perhaps a few in our state, you often don't see me denigrating or attacking anybody, even if they disagree with my own opinions.
Not something that we've talked about because I haven't seen it. All right, Jared Polis, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.